Back as online again for the same course, biology, continuing with our nervous coordination. We are going to look at the details of the nervous system, the components of the nervous system. We looked at the cells that make up the nervous system, where we looked at the receptor cells, the effector cells, and the nerve cells we call the neurons. To move into the details, the nervous system is made up of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. They are the two components of the nervous system, the two major branches of the nervous system. I wanted to use this as a summary. The central nervous system, I'm going to look at its details. It is comprising of the brain and the spinal cord. That is the central nervous system. Excuse me. It serves the major function of initiating simple reflexes. For example, the spinal cord, coordinating all responses. We shall find that the brain stores information. We shall find that the brain is the center for learning and so many other things. We shall find that the central nervous system functions majorly in interpreting that it will serve purposely interpreting impulses carried as information carried as impulses. We shall find also that the central nervous system will initiate responses. To move on, the peripheral nervous system is made up of the nerves, the different nerve fibers, and the nerve junctions we call the ganglions, the ganglia. The nerve fibers we are talking of the spinal nerves and then the cranial nerves. These nerves may be serving a sensory purpose. That's why we shall have the sensory system of the nerves and the motor system of the nerves. So the peripheral nervous system will be divided into two. The sensory system, which will comprise of sensory nerves, sensory neurons, interconnecting to form sensory nerves, and the motor system. The sensory system will be carrying the information in form of impulses to the central nervous system. And the motor system will be that part of the peripheral nervous system that will convey information away from the central nervous system. And the motor system will be much responsible for responses carried out by the effector tissues or organs. We said a response is that reaction carried out by part of the body of an organism it is that action carried out by part of the body of an organism in reaction to any stimuli. That action, whether running, shouting, or laughing, that you will carry out in reaction to any stimuli, to any stimulus, would be termed as a response. So the response will be as a result of the information carried by the motor system. So the motor system is divided into two, the voluntary and the involuntary systems. The involuntary system will also be known as the autonomic nervous system. We shall find that the autonomic nervous system controls and regulates responses that cannot be controlled by the body, by the brain. They occur, those responses that will occur without one's will be controlled by the autonomic nervous system, which is divided into two, into the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system will be that part of the autonomic nervous system which coordinates involuntary actions, involuntary responses, things you don't have control over. And then, for example, the sweating. You don't have control over sweating. You don't have control over vasoconstriction and other involuntary reactions by the body. And then the parasympathetic nervous, the parasympathetic nervous system will come in to regulate all of the involuntary actions by doing the opposite of what happened or what was caused by the sympathetic nervous system. So the parasympathetic nervous system will always come in to do the opposite, so as to regulate them, to regulate the intensity at which those responses are given or carried out by the body. So for these ones, coordinate and cause involuntary reactions or responses by the body. For these ones, the parasympathetic nervous system will come in to regulate that. Let me think I'm flowing and I'm moving with everyone. To go on, we shall start with the central nervous system. We've said the central nervous system is made up of the brain and the spinal cord. We've given the major functions of the central nervous system. We've said that the central nervous system include the functions of the central nervous system include the functions of the brain and the spinal cord. Like I'm going to look at them in details down there. I said if you don't have this work, if you don't have good organized notes, you can inbox me for those who are in the group, and those who are not in the group, you please join by contacting us via our WhatsApp number 0703 278 231. So as we are giving the functions of the brain and the spinal cord, we shall be giving the functions of the central nervous system. To cut the story short, we start with the brain. The brain is protected externally by the brain, by the skull. or the cranium. And internally is protected when we talk of protection, the protection is about mechanical contact with the brain. Internally, it is protected by a part we call the meninge, which is actually a small membrane that surrounds the brain. So these are the protection levels of the brain. The brain has two major parts, which are the forebrain that is made up of certain parts, the midbrain, and the hindbrain that is also made up of certain parts. Let me think we are flowing. I want us to flow well. The forebrain is made up of majorly the cerebellum, the cerebrum, the thalamus, and the hypothalamus. So the major parts that make up, the major functional parts that make up the brain are the cerebrum, thalamus, and the hypothalamus, and partly the pituitary gland. Then the hindbrain is made up of the pons. Shall look at the details of that. The medulla oblongata, and then the cerebellum. So these are parts that make up the brain. The major parts, there are other parts, but these are the major parts of the brain. The forebrain, are going to look at the function of each of these parts in details. And what happens when these parts are damaged. Let me think we are following and preparing the questions. Let's start with the cerebellum, the cerebrum. The cerebrum is also known as the cerebral hemisphere. The cerebral hemisphere is made up of two hemispheres, which are the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. The two hemispheres are connected by a part we call corpus callosum. These two, the left and the right hemispheres, are connected by a part we call corpus callosum. And this cerebral hemisphere, or the cerebrum, is protected by a small membrane we call the cerebral cortex. It's the membrane that covers up the cerebrum. Let me think we are flowing. The left hemisphere of the cerebrum receives and interprets impulses from the right hand side of the body. as the left receives and interprets impulses from the left hand side of the body. The left works on the right and the right works on the left. Let me think. We are flowing. The major purpose of the cerebrum, the major function of the cerebrum is to control and coordinate learning. You learned how to dance, how to talk, just because of this part of the brain. Memory, it is where whatever you know is kept. It is found in the frontal part of the head, in the forebrain. That's why when you are thinking about something, you tap the face. When you are forgetting about something, you start tapping the face. I don't know if it is an instinctive behavior, but that's why we usually tap the face, because it's where the forebrain is found, the cerebrum. It also coordinates reasoning. Personality. When I write about all these, I think you get what I mean. We are giving the functions of the cerebrum. It coordinates learning. It actually controls and coordinates learning, memory, reasoning, personality. It is responsible for one's intelligence. Responsible for one's intelligence. And when I talk of intelligence, I'm talking of thinking. I talk of thinking. I talk of sensing something and imagining. When I talk about intelligence, I talk about the degree of thinking, sensing, and imagining. All of these actions are as a result of the functioning of the cerebrum. So when the cerebrum is damaged, when you happen to get an accident and the cerebrum is damaged, all of these ones will be affected. Imagine of a scenario where someone is involved in an accident and this someone has been rushed actually to hospital. On gaining the consciousness, this someone cannot remember anything, not even his name, not even where he comes from. He cannot even sit and reason. He cannot think of anything but just looking. This someone is capable of seeing, hearing, and eating, but cannot remember or learn anything at that moment. Can you tell the part of the brain that was damaged? Imagine a scenario where they are saying that when one was involved in an accident, on scanning him when unconscious, he was found to have a damaged cerebrum. And the task is requiring you to describe the different infirmities this kind of a person is likely to face. The different challenges, this kind of a person is likely to get. So the response should be talking about the functions of the brain, of the cerebrum, but in an opposite way. This person will not be able to learn. The person will not be able to remember anything because the memory case has been damaged. So we are talking about the parts of the brain. So the cerebrum is covered. Let me think so. And here the scenarios are actually very easy. Let's assume it's the right hemisphere that is damaged. You assume it is the left hemisphere that is damaged. So think about all those cases. Know which kind of a membrane cover up the cerebrum. Which part joins the left and the right hemisphere? You remember all that. And if you do really remember that, I'm good to move on to the thalamus. The thalamus is that part of the brain that it transmits I think I'm good to clear this. I know you covered it. So I'm going to have a look at the thalamus. The thalamus is just located after it's just located after the cerebrum. And its function is to transmit impulses of sensation received from the sense organs, and then convey them to the cerebral cortex. We said the cerebral cortex is that membrane that covers the cerebrum. So the major function of the thalamus is just to receive impulses from the sensory organs. And transmits them to the cerebral cortex. This is what I've said. That is the major function of the thalamus. It's part of the forebrain. The thalamus connects to the hypothalamus, which hypothalamus controls all the activities of the pituitary gland. So I'm giving the functions of the hypothalamus. We looked at this in chemical coordination. It actually controls all the activities of the hypothalamus, of the pituitary gland. It is that part of the brain that controls all the activities of the autonomic nervous system. We mentioned some of these. The likes of the heartbeat, digestion. You have no control over respiration. You have no control over the movements and adjustments of the pupil. All these are activities caused by the autonomic nervous system. The sexual arousal, urination, so all those are functions of the hypothalamus. We shall find that in everything, for any response, we shall find the hypothalamus playing a function, playing a very vital role, initiating any response. We shall look at So for this one, serves, we've mentioned the number of them, controls all the activities of the pituitary gland. We shall find that the hypothalamus is the one that controls and initiates all the activities of the autonomic nervous system. We've mentioned some. We shall find that it's the hypothalamus that initiates or causes what we call the fight-flight response. So we are looking at the functions of parts of the brain. I will not talk about the pituitary gland because we looked at the pituitary gland previously. We saw its endocrine function. So before you go in further, if you really like what I'm sharing, you can comment, you can like, tap that thumb that is facing up, and like actually our video. It's the only reward you can give to us people. These are the parts, the major parts of the forebrain. We've looked at the cerebellum, we've seen its function. We've looked at the thalamus, the hypothalamus. We looked at the pituitary gland in the previous videos about the chemical coordination. So you can go and review chemical coordination. You'll see the function, the endocrine function of the pituitary gland when you review those videos. So before you continue, I'd like to entertain some questions from you people. I'd like to entertain questions from you. Here, I see Omar is present. I would like to answer. I want to respond to questions. I'm entertaining questions before we continue. So Gemma Rayan is present. Mumbere Den is present. Mwangus Johnson is present. Hi. Tumsime Imran is with us. Mwangus Johnson, you're most welcome. Is present. Asime Mike is present. Tana is present. Joel is present. Kevin today is with us. Tana Aseno is back. You're most welcome, Tana Aseno. Boom Saba Rayan is with us. You're most welcome. Assume Mike is having a question. Explain the relationship between the ADH, oxytocin, and hypothalamus. We said those hormones are secreted by the hypothalamus and stored in the pituitary gland. That's why I talked about the pituitary gland. They are separated by the hypothalamus and stored in the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland. We talked about that. Livingstone Alma is with us. Kasoma Colin is with us and is commenting that the hypothalamus is the satellite of the body. It is actually watching any changes that may occur to the body. So to call it the satellite of the body is very right. It will be the hypothalamus to detect changes in the blood sugar levels. It will be the hypothalamus or the receptor cells in the hypothalamus to detect changes in the body temperature and so many others. So to call the hypothalamus the satellite of the body Kasoma is very right. Let me think we are good to continue because I don't see any question. We are done with the components of the nervous system. We have looked at one of the nervous systems, the components, which is the central nervous system, partly, and we've looked at the brain, part of the central nervous system. We have been able to mention some functions of parts of the brain, basically the forebrain. And I think we are good to continue with the midbrain. The midbrain, it is this part of the brain that controls and coordinates the movements of the body, of the head specifically and the trunk. These movements, when I happen to rotate the head like this, these movements are coordinated by the midbrain. Any part of movement of any part of the trunk is coordinated by the brain. I mean the midbrain. It also receives impulses of hearing. Those are the audio impulses, and vision. Those are the light impulses. I mean the impulses generated by the eye cells, the eye sensory cells. So the midbrain serves two major functions: receiving impulses, receiving impulses, receiving impulses of audio and vision. So it's this part of the brain that receives that impulse before it is conveyed where it must be interpreted from. And also controlling movements of the what? The head and the trunk. So those are the functions, the major functions of the midbrain. Then the hindbrain, we mentioned some parts that make up the hindbrain. We said it is made up of parts like the medulla oblongata. It is also made up of parts like, we mentioned them, the medulla oblongata, the pons, the cerebellum, and so many others. So I don't want to be the major celebrity. I want the major functions of the cerebellum. There's a difference between a cerebrum and a cerebellum. I want to hear from you people contributing the functions of the cerebellum. People, I want to know the functions of the cerebellum. Before I answer questions, I want to see some functions of the cerebellum from you people. Anyone with any contribution? Anyone with any contribution? Maybe I'll come and go through them because it may take a lot of time. To cut the story short, the cerebellum is actually responsible for all muscular movements, whether contraction or relaxation of muscle cells. It is coordinated by the cerebellum. The cerebellum, it is that part of the brain that is responsible for balance. It is the part of the brain that is responsible for muscle movements. As also contribute. We are giving the functions of the cerebellum. As Mike has given us for balance and consciousness. Yes, the cerebellum is the part of the brain that controls and coordinates consciousness. You are conscious because the cerebellum is functional. You can move your hand from one position to the other because of the cerebellum. We are giving the functions. Please contribute. The functions of the cerebellum. Now, imagine someone is drunk. You can talk about the movement patterns of someone who is drunk. When someone is drunk, moves actually cannot move in a straight path. A drunkard person has a type of movement we call uncoordinated movement. Movement with no patterns. The liquor or the alcohol people drink affects mostly the cerebrum. And when the cerebrum is affected by these chemicals in the alcohol, it actually brings about, actually it affects the balance. To some of the people who overtake the alcohol, they are not even capable of moving because the cerebellum cannot coordinate the legs to cause movement. So the chemical, the chemicals that bring about drunkenness affect mostly this part because it is the part that is responsible for balance and muscular movement. The medulla oblongata, we very well know that it is the part that is responsible for all the autonomic functions, the autonomic responses. It controls the actions of the autonomic nervous system. It regulates heartbeat, the breathing rate. It is the one that brings about, it causes or initiates coughing because it is an autonomic response by the body. Sneezing is also an autonomic or automatic response by the body. We do not have control over them. So in short, the medulla oblongata controls and coordinates involuntary responses by the body. So we said our major target is to know to actually know not to cram. That is our major target. That's what we said. We are giving a hint on what you should know such that you can build on it and have a broader knowledge about it. So we said for us, we give you a clue where to start from. We are giving you an alternative source of information. We are online. Shall not forget to remind you about that. And our task is to help learners at least discover something, discover their abilities, get what they failed to get on time. We don't give any new thing, no. we give what was given by your teachers and a basic source of information. To move on, I would like to read some questions and contributions from you people. Kasoma. Kasoma is saying the ears are responsible for balance. The function of the ear, when we look at the details of the ear, we are going to look at the sensory organs. The functions of the ears is to actually sense movements, to sense the movements, generate impulses that are transmitted to the brain by the auditory nerves responsible for that balance. It is the brain, those impulses are taken to the cerebellum. It is the cerebellum that coordinates balance. But the impulses that are actually interpreted by the cerebellum are the ones that are generated by the ear in response to movements of the fluid in the inner ear. I think you covered that. So the functions of the ear, yes, it coordinates here, balance, but we all know that those parts, the sensory organs, they are only there to generate impulses about a certain stimuli, which impulses are transmitted to the brain for interpretation and instruction. So the balance is interpreted by the brain, the part we call the cerebellum. So the function of the ear is to function as a sensory organ, not an interpreting organ. So the ear comes in to sense stability, the level, actually, to detect levels of stability and generate a respective impulse, which is transmitted to the brain, which brain interprets through the cerebellum the information as that level of stability and collects it respectively. Let me think I've responded to you, Kasoma. Livingstone had already contributed that the cerebellum controls balance and locomotion. You're very right. It was the same from Asimwe Mike. Sammy Jellins is saying, aren't autonomic responses and somatic responses controlled by the peripheral nervous system? We looked at that. I showed you here the components of the nervous system, where we looked at the nervous system. When you rewind the video, after here you rewind it, the nervous system is made of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. When you go down, the peripheral nervous system has components. The peripheral nervous system is made of nerves and ganglia. And we said that the ganglia and the nerves of the peripheral nervous system form two systems, the sensory system and the motor nerve system. The motor nerve system, we said, is also divided into two systems, the involuntary and the voluntary, where we said the involuntary makes or forms what we call the autonomic nervous system. Let me think I'm flowing and I'm moving at the same pace with you people. I also said that there is a part that is controlling the autonomic responses, which is the autonomic nervous system, part of the peripheral nervous system. Let me think I've responded to Same Jennings. When I talk of the autonomic nervous system, I mean the peripheral nervous system. When I talk of the motor nervous system, I talk of the peripheral nervous system because they are all under peripheral nervous system. Have I answered you, Sammy? If yes, I'm grateful. So I'm looking, Colin Kasoma, is there any flow fluid to contribute to the balancing? When we shall look at, we shall actually look at the ear, we shall find that the inner ear is fluid filled. It is the fluid part of the ear. We shall find that the flow or the movement of that fluid in the ear, in that semicircular canal, determines balance, leads to generation of impulses that determine balance. So we shall not go into that before we get there. You cannot cross the river before you get to it. We said we am taught online. We have given the functions of the parts of the hind brain. And I think we are good to go to the functions, the general functions of the brain. We said if you truly love our service, the only thing you can do to us is to like. Just pressing that thumb you see up there. Do you see that word live up? If you can see that word live, there is somewhere like a thumb. Some people just tap the screen. It will like us automatically. The brain, it is the brain that receives all impulses from all receptor organs. And it is the brain that interprets all of the impulses received from the nervous system. The brain still stores information, like we say. It is the brain that controls all the reflex actions, but the brain does not initiate all. The brain controls and coordinates all nervous reflex actions, but it does not initiate all. Let me think I've clearly stated that. It is the brain that actually interprets any information carried in the impulses. That is what we call integrating. And to cut the story short, we have the basic information about the brain. We've talked of the brain controlling and coordinating all reflex actions. And we've said that it does not initiate all. We are going to look at what reflex actions are shortly. We are going to see which reflex action can be initiated by the brain and which ones cannot be initiated by the brain. Briefly after this. But the brain serves those functions. It coordinates and integrates all activities of the body. We've seen the brain playing a role in storage of information. We've seen the brain receiving and interpreting impulses from all sensory organs. And we've also seen the brain initiating responses, apart from some simple reflexes. Those are some of the functions of the brain. And briefly after this video, we are going to look at the spinal cord. Look at its structure, the functions. We said we am taught online. Only if you have any question or any supplement, but we are always grateful for being part of us. Someone is talking of the perilymph, that is semigelins. We are grateful. That is the fluid we find in the inner ear. It is from it is the one that moves the sensory hairs in the inner ear. So I'm reading comments here. I want to see the comments from you people. Tana Arsenal is thanking us. You're most welcome. We are grateful. If you really appreciate. So customer is at what time is the next lesson? Briefly after here. So members, if you don't mind, let's have a short break and come back with a second lesson about the spinal cord. Thank you.